Hello traders, it is, my name is Adam and it is Sunday the 24th of October. So just having a look at the high impact news that's scheduled for this week, there is actually quite a bit of interest rate decision oriented news that's coming up, high impact news, and I do think those will add some increased volatility into the market. So there's out of Canada, which will be on Wednesday, Japan, there's Eurozone as well. And then, of course, on Friday as well, there's quite a bit of news coming out there. So this week, just anticipating a little bit of increased volatility. Let's go ahead and move to the charts and have a look at what's going on there. And that just means that I'm going to be a little bit more cautious when it comes to just trading around those times for intraday trading, but also just an awareness of kind of what the sensitivity is towards the fear of inflation, and therefore kind of how are the different central banks going to be approaching what is their plan, or what is their focus towards dealing with potential inflation, and therefore tapering or any kind of long-term hinting at the exchange rate. Their interest rate changes. So having a look here at the, looking at the volatility, the VIX, one of the things I would note is we've actually had quite a lot of moves in the markets recently, and actually that volatility keeps dropping. So we are getting some moves, but we are getting this continued move back down to the lows, and therefore it's usually implied, sort of the idea is that with lower volatility, we're not really going to we'll get very sort of sluggish moves in the markets, or a lack of sustained trends. There doesn't really appear at this point in time to be anything that's going to change that. Overall, that also just implies that we're going to get more of the same at this point in time. So whichever moves we do get, it's just that it's nothing necessarily that unique. Looking at the US dollar, so the only thing I really notice about the US dollar is it is definitely now struggling with, let's call it 94.50 as an area of resistance, which isn't necessarily or traditionally the case, but there's definitely an argument to be made for that. We've broken the recent uptrend, the lows of that. We've got a kind of confirmed retracement happening on the weekly. It is now coming back into these old highs, and anywhere in this area would be interesting to see if we do get a move down and perhaps finish up with a small bullish candle by the end of the next week. Overall, I don't really see why there isn't any reason we can't potentially continue up towards 95, but I do want to see what happens this week as we approach this area. So actually, I'm still at least initially expecting, I don't see it to be unreasonable to expect the market to potentially try to move a little bit lower, a weaker dollar initially, but also there's no reason why we wouldn't then perhaps get a bit of a rebound if the intention is for that dollar to ultimately strengthen between now and the end of the year. Moving on and having a look at the majors, let's look at euro dollar. Same thing again, euro dollar has broken this most recent downtrend on the daily. It is now officially in a weekly retracement, and again, this makes the most sense to me if we're going to head up towards 1.17 perhaps and test that range, see if we are going to test the outside of that range and find some potential resistance on this. So at least initially, I'm still expecting a stronger dollar and therefore a weaker US dollar. Just a stronger euro and a weaker US dollar. Looking at cable in terms of that, so cable looking quite a bit stronger than, stronger versus weaker. Looking at this, we've got a bullish monthly candle at this point in time. We are coming back into some resistance around that 1.38, 1.39 level. And so perhaps this week, early week, looking for it to come back down and test, find some support, then perhaps take another run up at that 1.3830 level there. So again, that also hints at at least by the end of the week, perhaps a stronger cable. Have a look at the Australian dollar against the US dollar. Also, this one starting a little bit of a daily retracement, but overall in a nice uptrend on the weekly. That monthly also looking a little bit more bullish than bearish. So this one I'm looking to see, at least initially, is just saying leaning that a little bit more towards, we don't have any really strong obvious trends, but I'm leaning that a little bit more towards a weaker US dollar and stronger major pair against that. Same thing with the Kiwi dollar. This is very much range type of behavior, ranging type behavior, but overall that monthly candle is looking quite a bit more bullish than bearish. So I'll be interested to see if we do ultimately finish quite lower down, and then that'll hint at perhaps a failure to go to the upside and therefore a stronger US dollar, or if we do by the end of the week, same as with what I was looking at with sterling, is to see that we start to push up and finish up towards the highs. And so it isn't always the case. Usually if we have a trend, I'd have a more of a reasonable expectation of a correction and then a continuation. But at this point in time, because these are their behavior is not strongly trending on any of the majors. It's a little bit less clear, which is just, again, it just means usual caution when we come to that. So for intraday trading, it always makes the most sense to just approach each day as to what are the conditions looking like. All right, the market is moving each day. The question is it kind of trending in a very strong fashion? Is the momentum really there? Or is it perhaps looking a bit more range-like on a higher time frame, and therefore just either stay away or exercise more caution or manage the risk appropriately? So just have a look at dollar yen coming back down into the middle of the prior week's, back down to the midpoint of the prior weekly candle. It's not a bad place for it to find some support and perhaps carry on up. So that hints at that, again, supports that idea of perhaps towards the end of the week getting a stronger US dollar perhaps. And then dollar Swissy, we're now moving very much down to the downside. We're breaking through that weekly level of support, and therefore we might head a little bit lower. And so that's showing a stronger, weaker US dollar, stronger Swissy. Let's have a look at dollar CAD. Dollar CAD breaking down towards these lows. We've had some decent trades on these stronger CAD pairs lately. That monthly, you can see that strong resistance, that failure to get back up above that, and so far quite a bearish monthly candle. So leaning a little bit more towards this, perhaps just coming up and testing these highs and then continuing to the downside, and then finding some possible actual semi-decent trading opportunities on dollar CAD. So getting some mixed signals across the majors. We'll have to see how that ultimately plays out. I figure that there's going to be back and forth this week as opposed to just a continuation of a trend. It does look as though that by the end of the week, it's just leaning that a little bit more towards a weaker US dollar perhaps. All right, so moving on and having a look at the currency pairs of interest. So starting off with dollar CAD showing really strong support here. It needs to break back up above 1.4400, but what for me that will provide is some good intraday buying opportunities as we head back up towards, let's say, 1.4650. And a nice little solid bounce off that monthly 1.4400 level. So looking at that, Euro Yen as well. So Euro Yen, I'm just noting last week's bearish rejection off this 133 level, and therefore break below that could be a good opportunity to short, continue to back down, or back down into the midpoint again of that previous week's candle and back into these highs around that 130.76 level. Possibility of that being the case should it, on the other hand, break above the high. This will be a continuation, but it's going to run into some good resistance at that 133.50 level. Euro Swissy, also quite interesting to me. I am just loosely aware that, the SNB's, Swiss National Bank, a little bit some concerns there in terms of them. I still was around. I was trading the day of their last intervention, so I'm a little bit twitchy about, just CHF pairs, but this one looking nice and bearish. There is still some room for it to head a little bit further, so pullbacks and continuations or shorting opportunities to the downside, but just otherwise, just perhaps lowering my risk on that just in terms of any potential S&P interference in any way, whether they do that, whether it's just verbally or using social media, just staying aware of any particular signals from them. Communications. Okay, then EURJPY, this is now due, I think, ready for a really deeper retracement, and therefore, at least for the first couple of days of the week, there could be some good buying opportunities as it heads, especially once it breaks above 1.63, as it heads back up towards 1.64, or even potentially as high as 165.50. Pound yen. So again, pound yen is running into some big resistance. There's a nice little bit of a bearish candle there at this point in time. A break below that would, again, similar to euro yen, would imply a bit of a deeper correction to the downside. But that monthly is looking really nice and bullish. It depends on ultimately, we've still got nearly 10 days until the end of the month, so it depends how that could ultimately close out, but I still would expect possibly a bit of a deeper correction. But overall, this looks nice and bullish, but there is clearly, I've got to see how price reacts at that level. Then, comparing that to, say, CAD yen. So CAD yen looking really nice and bullish on that monthly. Overall, looking pretty good there. We've got a similar type of structure here, so I'm looking for at least the possibility of a slightly short, deeper correction, a little bit further before it finds its feet, coming into these old highs, and then there could be a potential reversal, and looking for that to then continue to the upside. Swiss yen, similar scenario. It's moved all the way up to 124, and a break of the low of this bullish candle, last week's candle, would make sense to me to see price potentially coming back down into these highs. So, the yen pairs is not crystal clear at this point because a lot of them have now had a big, strong move, a bit of a correction on that daily, deeper correction back into all the highs actually makes sense, and then I'll deal with whether they're going to correct further or not. Aussie yen as well, you could just see this quite a, kind of a failure at this point. Again, that's a strong weekly level. It's coming back down into an area of resistance that it's managed to work its way through in the past, and therefore might find support and continue on. And there's no doubt that that is an area of resistance up ahead. So there might be opportunities to the downside before it finds its feet and then tries to take another run at the highs again. And that sort of applies across those yen crosses. Aussie Kiwi, just noting this bearish monthly candle that's currently currently forming. We have produced a bit of a swing high. We've broken below 1.05. And price here is just being rejected off that 1.05 level. So I'll be looking for some breaks of this little level of support here, potentially continuing this to the downside. And that's pretty much it in terms of currency opportunities. Nothing out there that looks really fantastic, but I do think that their opportunities will start to reveal themselves over the coming days. Just before I move on to some of the other things in the video, I just wanted to draw your attention to this. I got to kind of manage to unlock, because I kind of, I guess, passed 500 subscribers. So I managed to unlock a community tab, which just allows me to post images, do polls and videos, which is pretty cool. So I'm probably going to start using this a little bit more actively, the images and polls. Please do me a favor and just give me some feedback on some of these items here, because that will help me tailor how much content you want, because I want to be one of those channels that provides the right amount of content, and there's different types of content as well. At the same time, not providing so much content that you can't possibly get through it, in a given week. So just to draw your attention to that community tab on that. All right. So let's go and have a look at precious metals. Gold. All right, so gold, yeah, was quite nice and bullish, and I do think it's going to attempt to take another run at this 1800 level. Overall, look, no clear direction on the monthly. Okay, so the problem with that is that although it looks nice and bullish on the daily, it just doesn't have any sort of medium. If you think of there being different, numbers of shorter term, intermediate and longer term traders or transactions taking place, that really doesn't at this point seem to be additional weight. So I would be incredibly cautious with my short-term trades. That's really the most where I would expect some moves, and I would expect there to be resistance at these key points until we start to build up more of a track record of breaking through these levels. So there's a bit of a knockback, and it might end up coming back down a bit. I also think it's keen to quite, take another run. It just doesn't necessarily mean it's going to succeed in doing that. Silver, and this is one of those rare times where silver is actually looking a little bit more, better behaved, a little bit sort of, better behaved than gold. So we can see here just 2481 or 2480 acting as some current resistance. Overall, looking for this to pull back, perhaps continue onwards. It is looking, overall, it's got some really nice intraday price action behavior, so they're a lot more orderly. Let's move on and have a look at crude oils. Crude oils looking really nice and bullish. At some point, we're going to have a deeper correction. I mean, it can't keep going forever. At some point there will be this, and we are starting to approach these old highs in towards here where that could be the case, but for now, okay, a little bit of a slower weekly candle there, so it is starting to lose momentum. You can see the candles getting smaller and smaller, and now almost an indecision candle, so that will be interesting to see if we do get in a burst and a rejection, or if we get a bit of a break of the low of last week. I think that could be potentially worthwhile taking note of. And also just looking at this attempt here, these are usually signs of failure, although that is bullish and there are buyers below here. The kind of just both of those being a drop and a pushback, and then another drop and a pushback, also just hinting at the fact that we might get a bit of a deeper correction this week. So and that's fine. At some point, I'd love to have a correction down towards 75 and then find some buying opportunities at that point. Just noting on a bit of that sort of caution there. Again, overall, still does look nice and bullish, but just knowing that, the shape of the candles just showing that the movement this previous week is different from the previous weeks, and therefore we might be getting somewhere. We might just be, heading in towards an area where we get a bit of break, but also noting that on that monthly we started to break through to some nice new highs, and it looks nice and strong there. Okay, so I will just keep an eye on these levels of resistance here. I'm still principally bullish, but I'm also going to look to see if we break the lows. So it just means that either starting to join it once we break above these highs, looking for buying opportunities there. And until we do, if we start to break these lows, we break back down below that, then I'll be prepared for moves a little bit lower. And also something else I completely forgot, I am going to be speaking at the London Investor Show, so if you are going to be around, please do register. I think it's free. I haven't actually had a look at the registration, but do feel free to come through and join and meet me there. I will almost certainly be there for the morning perhaps not necessarily the afternoon. We'll have to see how that goes. I have got some other commitments, but yes, have a look at that. So I'll be one of the speakers, and it would be nice to see you there. If you are, just feel free to head over to the londoninvestorshow.com. All right, and have a look at stuff there, see if you want to join us. Okay, so on to the global indices, starting off with the US, specifically the Dow. We've broken through these levels of resistance around that 35,400 level. That weekly looks nice and bullish. I love the fact that we closed up above these highs. That is, in isolation, a bullish signal. This monthly candle currently looking really nice and bullish. Not too much of a correction. We need, at some point, we're going to need a bigger correction, but this looks very nice. And it's specifically the fact that we closed, pretty solidly above that level. All of these old highs to me, is a really good sign. So, there might possibly be some sort of shorter-term pullbacks and looking to test some support around these areas and a continuation. I am going to be looking for buying opportunities cautiously at this time, but I'm going to be leaning towards that. And obviously, at some point, I know that we'll perhaps have a deeper correction. But yes, any kind of retests, at least initially in the week, perhaps to find some support here, or intraday buys to the upside. Let's have a look at the S&P. I love the fact that we did, on the Dow, we closed up at all-time highs. That's great. I can see here as well, we're coming into these previous old highs on the S&P. Again, that weekly looks in isolation, looks really good. We didn't close up above these highs. I don't think we did. No, we didn't. We still look relatively healthy, so we'll see how that goes. That's a bit of a nice bullish engulfing candle at this point in time. Monthly isn't over, but just observing that. So any kind of pullbacks, perhaps, excuse me, into these old highs around here to find some support, or even down towards 4,500. Just to see if we can then find some support and carry on and get back past these levels. So I might just note that for now, but right now I'm not really seeing too much of a struggle. Certainly not on the Dow side, perhaps the S&P. Let's have a look at the Nasdaq. The Nasdaq still has some way to go. That monthly candle again in isolation, not looking bad. I would have preferred for it to come back into these old highs and test it. Nevertheless, here we appear to be climbing to the upside, and yes, there is a bit of resistance. You can see our price managed to close back down amongst sort of down below these old highs here. Or at least amongst the old highs of these candles here. So we'll see how that goes. But yes, I'm going to be looking to see if this moves to the upside, if we can break these highs, testing, and at least the Nasdaq having some moves up to these old highs. If there's some room for that, there might be some initial pullbacks into lower highs and looking for buying opportunities. We'll see. If they just fall right through those levels if that is the case, and immediately they start to drop and they fall right through those levels, then obviously I get a little bit more cautious. I'll sit it out and wait and see how the rest of the week goes. I'm just leaning a little bit more bullish than bearish. Again, just noting here, looking at the mini Russell, the Russell 2000, a bit of a reaction off that 2,300 level. It is in an uptrend. I need to see it get back over that just before I sort of lean back into it a little bit more bullishly. Then having a look at the FTSE. So FTSE, predictably having that, I say predictably because it's not necessarily as strong as the US markets, and having that reaction off that 7,200 level, which is a historic level. So I'll be more cautious here because I need to really see us get past that, and historically the UK markets are not necessarily as strong as the US markets. So that for me would be great if we can get back over 7,200, start to break past those highs, looking to be more bullish. And again, we're coming back into these old highs here, but also perhaps a move back down into the lower levels here. So there is some possibility of, or similar to the currency, so there's going to be perhaps a move one way and then again a move another. So as opposed to just a continuation throughout the week where you just get a move in a single direction with normal minor retracements, there might literally just be kind of half the week is going one way and the other half the week is going the other. DAX pulling back in, nice little bullish candle in isolation, looking really good. You can just see how it was starting to stumble here, that a bit of a correction. Nice healthy candle at this point and a strong rebound off that 15,000 level. All of that looking pretty good. We are now at least in an uptrend on the daily, so continuation above this level. But I'm just always concerned about the choppiness over here. So the US markets, to me, a little bit more attractive from that perspective. Looking at the stocks, Euro stocks, solid bullish candle. These looking pretty good as well. Just going to be cautious as we come into these old highs if that's ultimately going to be a strong level of resistance. But leaning, as I said, just that little bit more bullish than bearish. Interesting look at the Nikkei. This not looking as strong. Definitely buyers below here, but not managing to finish that much better off. There is an uptrend on the daily. Nice little bullish candle here. Break above 29,000. Could see that then take another run. I would say cautiously back up to 29.4. Not as strong. Let's have a look at the ASX. So the ASX that is beautiful. I mean, picture perfect in terms of a nice healthy correction back down into the old highs and then producing those nice strong rejections of those lows. And that's currently is 2 rejections off that, and therefore just indicating, yes, that there is could very well be then a push away from that level, and certainly back up to these previous highs around that 7,600 level. So again, there's just close. Yes, that there are buyers in the market, and if they can continue up, that would be great. Moving on to the equities of interest. So Royal Mail having had, still having, kind of now in a downtrend on that weekly, coming back into around that 420 level. It's in a great area for buyers to start to come back in. So I'm quite happy to see if that is going to be the case. Even if October just brings about a very small bullish candle, that could be a nice little turning point. American Express, look at that, just that breakout above the kind of old resistance. Look at that solid, beautiful weekly candle, closed right up and free. That's a particularly bullish signal for me. That monthly also looking really good so far, so that looking really nice. So Amex for me, potential pullbacks, anything being possible buy opportunities there. Quite interesting. ARC Innovation, this one currently just holding above that 107 level of support, still technically in a downtrend of lower highs, low lows on the weekly. No real kind of trend in terms of that. You can just see the moving averages and price action all crisscrossed around each other. But yeah, I'd like to see this climb a little bit higher. There's no reason, I don't think, this week why this couldn't possibly make it back up to 125.38, these highs here, or perhaps even up to 130. It's not, compared to, say, Amex, not necessarily looking as strong as that, but it may very well get picked up by the rest of them. Berkshire Hathaway, pretty cool in an area here, looking nice and bullish there. That weekly candle looks really good. I'd like to see it get past that 290 level, but looking pretty good. Okay, most of this, we'll see how we react at those levels. But yeah, that's those so far. A lot of those are really nice, strong signals. Then BP. So BP's had a really good run. This is a potential turning point here. Just noting that monthly now that's a solid uptrend. There's no doubt that's in an uptrend over there. And that daily producing a nice little bullish signal over here. That's now pulled back into the previous week's midpoint. So that's a 50 fib kind of area. And this may well actually decide to continue out from that. This is still just a higher high, just noticing a higher and higher low on that candle there. Not necessarily a turning point just yet. All right, just interesting to see that. Coca-Cola producing a nice little bullish candle here as well. A little bit of a consolidation in this area, so breaks above these old highs around here. Looking nice and bullish, breaks below this, obviously not looking that good, but looking at the monthly here as well. Pull back into these old highs, nice little bullish candle forming the inside bullish candle so far, looking pretty good. We do have a bit of a kind of what's going on here with the weekly, looking more bearish than bullish, but that monthly looks good. Daily, just waiting on that. So actually this week, I think for Coca-Cola, I'd like to see a break above this to see a general bullishness return to it. If it fails to do that, which is not really showing any signs of failure, I'd be surprised. But yeah, so far these markets all not looking. There are times when I can highlight the market is starting to stall and starting to look weak. It's not showing it this week at any rate. Looking at Exxon coming into these old highs here, that weekly looks, the monthly chart, really nice. I like that. Very nice and bullish. I wanted to break through these levels of resistance, but again, that's a nice little bullish candle. So look at that. Pullback, bullish into these old highs here. And you can see it trying to stay above that level. So certainly I think it's going to give it another go. But this, without a doubt, this could be potentially a sign of exhaustion, and there's a potential indecision candle. So I'm going to mark that because that may well turn out to be too strong for it to get past, and therefore there might be a break and a move further down, which could be similar to BP. Those monthlies are looking really nice and strong. It's the weeklies that I have some concerns with. General Motors, monthly looks fine, but there's definitely some strong resistance at that 60 mark, and so we need to see if we can get past that. So break above the high, this would be a nice little confirmed uptrend in terms of another swing low, a high low. The daily producing a lower high at this point in time, so there's a bit of kind of a wait and see going on here. I'd like to see a continuation, but I do think that there's some issues, there's difficulties with the 60 level, so I have to see how that ultimately turns out. JP Morgan, there we go, closing up above these old highs. That's a really nice bullish candle. That monthly looking pretty good. So this signaling at least at this point in time, every intention to just carry on. So there might be some minor retracements and continuation. Overall, that's a particularly bullish signal. So I am curious to see if that can continue on from that. The monthly not looking too bad either. Morgan Stanley, this is a bit of a mess on that daily, but it has pulled back, produced a bit of a bullish swing off that 100 mark. That weekly candle, let's just see. So that one is actually an outside candle, closed a little bit higher, a bit of an indecision candle. There's a battle going on here. there's a bit of a battle going on here. Although there are some buyers in here, it is also starting to stall a bit. So I do think it's possible for Morgan Stanley, this is going to be the range that's going to struggle with. Might be able to work its way back up to the top. I'm not convinced just yet if it's going to be able to get free of that, and it might find itself coming back down to test this. So that's interesting to me. I'm just going to mark that and just see if that is going to be significant for us. I'm just going to kind of put that there, and we'll see how that is over the coming week. Interesting. Apple. So Apple, of course, looking pretty good there on their weekly. Really nice retest of these old highs here, coming back, and a beautiful monthly bullish candle at that point. So certainly here, okay, you can see there's a bit of a reaction here at this 150 level. Can we get past that? But if we can, I don't see why we don't get back up past those old highs. So 150 is really going to be the case. Do we get a pullback and then another run up at that level? Nvidia, overall, that weekly looking pretty good. You can see again that rejection of these highs similar to that could ultimately turn out to be a bit of an issue. So I'm going to mark that to see if that becomes a problem for us. Again, might find the price heads back down here and then tries to take another run at that level. But again, that weekly looking still more bullish. That monthly, this is going to, we're going to have to see if these rejections over here become significant. PayPal. On the one hand, I think this is a nice correction to the downside. I always think it's much needed. Look at that 300 resistance up there. If you want to go a little bit higher, call it 310. This, no doubt, is a problem there. I see price coming back down into these lows here, and back down towards 233 this week. But yeah, that's quite a strong move to the downside. There'll most likely be a bit of a bounce over here if there's going to be some buy orders at those old lows. But yeah, this one is not a buy at this point in time. I want to see how it reacts at that level. If it does produce a really strong bullish engulfing candle, if there's a rebound that's as strong as the move to the downside. So quite interesting to me, but also, this is the kind of bigger correction I was hoping to see across the board. So this is the first one where I really see within a relatively healthy trend, you can see the strong rejection at the top, and then a much deeper correction. That is something I'd love to see sort of move down towards the 20 moving average or even a little bit further. This is the first one that really has that. So that is interesting to me. That, I think, is going to be something I need to see next week to see what's the status on those. Now, Tesla, of course, back up. Have we closed? Past we have. I haven't been watching it. There we go. Solid. So far, we're above the old highs. I'm going to mark that because that might be significant at some point. So this one, I mean, look at this. Okay, so it gapped up. And it's closed right at the highs. That is very, very, very bullish. Okay, it's a very bullish signal. It could be followed by an equally bearish candle, but that in itself is just huge buying enthusiasm. It is parabolic. There's no doubt that this, even on the daily, has gone parabolic. It's like parabolic on the weekly. That monthly has gone parabolic. So that's fine, and at some point there just won't be any buyers, but it's interesting to me that it's that close to 1,000. I want to see if it can work its way up to those levels. So I'm just noting that it is parabolic, and therefore when it does have a correction, it's going to be quite a big one. We've had this, we had this past over here. We had a big correction down there. I want to see if we do get that. What I'm going to do here is actually update this. So we'll just, I'm not expecting this anytime soon. I have to say that this overall does look, still to me, looks more bullish than bearish. And that's a really strong move past the old highs there, but we're not free and clear yet. So this week I want to see what happens in the next few days. Do we actually fall back from where we are here? As I said, we closed. You can see we closed right up into the last minutes of trading there. Do we have any other corrections? Overall, I got to say, in many ways, this looks really strong and bullish, but even the stronger stocks will at some point have a healthy correction. And so that I find very interesting because PayPal having a bit of a deeper correction, Tesla, they're starting to kind of break apart. You're starting to see this, not a tide, what's that expression, rising tide lifts all boats, not necessarily the case this week looking amongst these. And that could be significant is where I'm going with this. If it turns out that some are starting to fall and some are starting to climb, that could be very interesting in terms of what it signifies. So, okay, so Spider here just right down at the lows, struggling to kind of take off away from that. And so that to me is interesting. There was a break below that, this daily range, and then it closed up higher, but there's lots of resistance up here. So similar to one of the other ones I was talking about, I think it was Morgan Stanley, where I was just saying there was a range that it was stuck in. There we go. I want to see what happens out of this area here. So I'm not going to make any assumptions yet. It actually looks very much as though it's starting to close to the downside, and may well actually head a little bit lower. So some really interesting. Some mixed signals across the board. In fact, even on those indices. So, taking all of that into account, yes, I could see these bullish signals, but they could, could turn out in hindsight. You look back and go, yes, they were bullish, but that was kind of like the last thrust. But some of these, to me, are looking very, very strong. So we've got this bullish candles on the Vanguard as well, looking really nice. But again, I want to see how it reacts at this at these old highs if we get back past that. So far, any kind of pullbacks and another run back up to the upside, yeah, just interesting to me. There's still that potential for it to continue to the upside. So there are some really strong buy signals and lots of buyers in the market. Some of these looking particularly strong, and then some that are giving some mixed signals. Okay, so this is definitely worth mentioning. I noticed that generally, so if I look at Treasuries, look at Eurobond, look at that moving, breaking down below these lows, look at the Eurobond as well, also coming back down to these levels of support, and we've got that drop in volatility. So if we kind of take all of that into account, a little bit of a move up from gold, tiny, dollar yen looking a bit strong, but collectively put all that together, none of them are really collectively screaming kind of panic safe haven type behavior, and certainly looking at these, there just don't seem to be much buyers or many buyers of bonds, and so all of that, it sort of leans towards supporting that area of the markets looking particularly bullish. I find that interesting. Okay, so Bitcoin as well, nice, solid, beautiful moves up, but that is significant. I do think that's significant, so I'm going to mark this because at this point in time, it does appear as though we might actually have an area we struggle with. Overall, looking really good in every other respect, but look at that solid rejection of that level, and therefore could find this week that it heads back down to these lows. And so it's possible that 60,000 is going to be Bitcoin's struggle for a while. Let's have a look. Overall, I still like the longer term feel on it, but medium term is up for grabs at the moment. Ethereum, they've had really strong recoveries, but they might just find that they're going to encounter a ceiling for the foreseeable future. So that just means slightly higher risk in my mind for these. I'm leaning more bullish, but there's no doubt to me that there are some areas here that this requires. That was quite a strong reaction off those off these old highs this week as well. So this just means that there could be another push up and another rejection. So higher risk in terms of intraday trading. NEO not really going anywhere. Look at that, not really doing much, and having had a beautiful correction and then headed up, it's pushing back down. So the foreseeable future, NEO not looking as bright. Cardano also having moved down a bit of an indecision candle, having gone nowhere for 4 or 5 or 6 weeks. Look at that. This actually looking a little bit more bearish, especially if it comes back down towards these lows. That might actually find its way heading to the downside. Ripple as well, also looking particularly weak. That's quite interesting to me. So what may be the case with some of these is just there's now just more and more stuff out there, alternative stuff in terms of NFTs and cryptos, and therefore it's possible there's just going to be not enough people to engage in all of them, and therefore they might just get people starting to take some profit on them. It's interesting to me because although there has been a good recovery on some of these, some of them are looking weaker than they should if they were really going to be that much stronger. So they should be looking stronger than they are. And so for that reason, I see cryptos as a little bit higher risk this week. I want to see what's going to be happening next. And that's it. So ladies and gents, thank you very much. I apologize. Today's video is a little bit longer than normal. I do hope you enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing you next week. So thank you very much. Have a good one.